Welcome to another episode of We Are Carbon. I'm Helen Fisher and I'm joined by Duncan Catchpole, founder of the Cambridge Food Hub and author of Local Food Ecosystems, a book which covers much of the thinking behind the Hub's work. There are so many incredible examples of people regenerating soil and ecosystems out there, people working in harmony with the land to bring benefits to the climate, food resilience and nutrition, to name a few. But with agriculture being a cornerstone of our economic models, to be able to fully support those who are thinking sustainably in the field, we need to also think sustainably about the entire network that they tie into. It's been a huge pleasure, therefore, to have this opportunity to speak with Duncan about the steps that they've been taking to join the dots within a food supply chain in an entirely new way, in and around this small hub within the east of England. Their vision is a better food system, one which supports people and planet, and in particular is there to support a diversity of local food producers whose success is central to making the whole vision possible. It is a realisation of regenerative principles, including circularity and interconnectivity, being put into practice to coordinate food supply in a far more forward-thinking model. There's elements within this that I think could be of huge inspiration and relevance to other locations and sectors, so I hope you'll pick up some ideas to mull over. There's links to related episodes and further info recommended by Duncan in the description. New episodes of this podcast are added every other Tuesday. You can find them on YouTube and your favourite podcasting platforms, so don't forget to subscribe to keep up to date. Right, let's get stuck in. Hi Duncan, thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to kick us off with just a quick introduction to yourself and also how you became interested in this concept of local food ecosystems?
Certainly, yeah. So, my name is Duncan Catchpole. I'm the founder and owner of the Cambridge Organic Food Company, which is a Cambridge-based organic vegetable box scheme. So we deliver around about 1,000 veg boxes each week, and predominantly these boxes are filled with produce which has come directly from farms which are local to Cambridge. But also, in addition to that, another aspect of our business is Cambridge Food Hub, which is more of a business-to-business food supply chain coordination enterprise. And in that, we're particularly putting a new concept in local food supply chain coordination into practice. And this concept we've called the local food ecosystem. And on the back of that, I've got a copy right here. I have written a book on the subject called Local Food Ecosystems, how food hubs can help create a more sustainable food system. So you also asked in there sort of what got me into it, and well, what really, so the Cambridge Organic Food Company has been trading for 25 years now. What originally got me into that was actually through my father. My father ran an organic apple orchard in Suffolk. That's where I sort of grown up around that. And then at the time when I was going away to college, this was just at the time when the very first sort of box schemes were starting to sort of crop up in the country. So yeah, it was through that connection really that I got started in this business. But with regards to how I got interested in local food ecosystems, I was largely influenced by a book which is called Harmony, A New Way of Looking at the World. And this talks about what are known as principles of harmony, which might also be described as an observation of the laws of nature, of working natural ecosystems. So that really got me thinking about, how these principles, which in some ways are the antithesis of the way that sort of the incumbent sort of economic paradigm worked, which is very much a linear process. But yeah, how these sort of principles of harmony, which are much more circular in their nature and sort of based on principles such as wholeness, interconnectivity, diversity, adaptation, etc. The way things work in a natural ecosystem. So I really set about thinking, how might these principles be applied to the thing which I know best, which is food distribution, so hence coming up with the concept of the local food ecosystem.
That's really wonderful. We've actually had Richard Dunn on the show, who takes those principles in a sort of different context and does education particularly for young children. So I think it's so beautiful how there's an intertwining of the mindset and how those principles can go through different areas of our lives.
Yeah, I'd say really those principles should apply to or should and could apply to everything, if only sort of people that way inclined and sort of want to actually sit down and think, okay, how might I apply this to textiles or banking or whatever whatever sort of thing serves the human race. Let's try and apply principles of harmony to that.
Absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. And predominantly with the work that you're doing with Cambridge Organic, that's more of a distribution focus for yourself. Has it always been that way, or do you have a background in growing? Is that more what your father is sort of influenced?
A little bit. I through the connection with the orchard, obviously I've grown up picking apples. Remember as a teenager, quite often I'd get some of my schoolmates and we'd pick apples in the morning, and then we'd be given a bit of money for doing that, and we'd go off spending it in the afternoon. So those were sort of good days. That was sort of summer holidays as a teenager. But then there was one year in particular where I actually took over management of the orchard myself. And I tell you what, I've never worked as hard for so little money, sort of ever really. So that experience was fantastic. It was an absolute pleasure because I did it with my dad as well, who's since sort of passed away, so he's no longer with us. So I'm really thankful for that year of sort of doing it with him and sort of really getting close to nature and really getting some hands-on experience of food production. But the greatest learning experience from that is just how much hard work it takes to produce food. And I gained an awful lot of respect for anybody that runs sort of food production enterprise. So real hats off to anyone who's involved in farming and food production, really, because these guys work incredibly hard for really very little return.
That's an incredibly good point, because we can take it for granted just where that food comes from. It's there on the shelf in the supermarket, and you just sort of, the mindset of people going shopping is, how can I have that conveniently? How can I have it for the best cost? But the journey of it that it's gone through, and the number of hands being involved in the farming of that food and getting it to that shelf, it's an awful lot of work, as you said, and it's a very detached process for many people. So I think there's an aspect of that in what you're doing with the food ecosystems that's connecting people back to the production of food, even though they might be detached from that in their careers and their life and their jobs, but actually seeing where my food comes from, taking an interest in whether that's having an impact on the environment in a good way or a bad way. So I think it would be really fantastic if you could, in your own sort of view of it, offer us an explanation of what is a local food ecosystem. How does it differentiate and encompass the principles of harmony?
Certainly, yeah, I'd be happy to. So the word ecosystem was very, very specifically chosen to describe this concept because, as I say, we talk about the principles of harmony, and that's an observation of or a reflection of the laws of nature in practice. So every area will already have what I'd describe as a local food network. So any sort of city or region that you go to, there are food producers and there are sort of independent shops, restaurants, food processing businesses, etc. So that's what I would describe as a local food network. What really sort of differentiates that from a local food ecosystem is the way that those enterprises sort of interact with one another. I'd really sort of set my stall out and say I don't think there's really an example of a working example of what I'd describe as a local food ecosystem yet. So you're kind of describing something that doesn't really exist. But what would differentiate a local food network from a local food ecosystem really will be something about scale, and not just scale in terms of the number of enterprises that are involved in that system, but also the number of interactions which happen between them. And I'd hope that all sort of operators within this ecosystem would prioritise trading with one another before they would sort of over longer distances. So yeah, I'm gonna sort of come back a little bit and sort of say, what is the purpose of the food hub, sort of the role of the food hub within all this. And I'd say that the role of a food hub is to create a vibrant local food economy. That's the end goal. That's what you're trying to achieve, and then the food hub's role is really to facilitate that. But yeah, as I say, a vibrant local food economy would be characterised by an abundance of sort of small-scale local food producers. That's market gardeners, sort of farmers, both sort of large scale and small. Artisanal food processing businesses, independent shops that are sort of specialising in or are stocking locally produced sort of foods and locally processed foods as well, and restaurants likewise that are sort of will specialise in putting local produce onto their menus, and then trying to make as many sort of interactions as possible. So if you've got a farm somewhere local that's growing carrots, we want to see those carrots in all of those independent shops, and we want to see the restaurants buying them, and we want to see perhaps a sort of a local processing business that's making carrot soup, but then selling that carrot soup to the same independent shop. So that's where I say we get these sort of multitudes of interactions happening.
So when you're kind of building these closer connections between the producers and the consumers and making those within a very localized area, it gives incredible opportunities for circularity and for sort of making relationships that tie in waste into the processing and the movement. And I know that there's something that has sort of come out in what you're doing, like these green coffee shop schemes, that I'd love if you could explain a little about what they are and how they've evolved.
So back in 2019, which is when the Cambridge Food Hub first became operational, we kicked off with something that we call the Green Coffee Shop Scheme, which is a lovely little sort of exemplar of the local food ecosystem concept in operation. So what's happening in the Green Coffee Shop Scheme is we are delivering products to local coffee shops, most notably an organic barista-style oat milk. But then when we're at the coffee shops making that delivery, will also collect the used coffee grounds. We then take the coffee grounds over to a recycling centre, where they get turned into coffee logs. Actually, this is slightly old news now, because sadly the coffee log recycling centre has sadly ceased trading. But for the purpose of the illustration, I'll pretend they're still going. So we take them over to this recycling centre. They get turned into coffee logs, and then, of course, while our van is there, having unloaded the coffee grounds, we then load up with the coffee logs and we bring them back to the food hub, where they're one of the products that we then distribute. So what's going on there is that by when you're visiting a location, you're not only delivering products, but you're looking for opportunities to collect something at the same time. So this is a circularity principle. So we're being uber efficient with our use of vehicles, and we've eliminated inefficient empty van miles. But the significance of the scheme goes much further than that. You see, the point is those coffee grounds are valueless. The recycling centre doesn't pay anything for them. It simply offers a place where they can be dumped for free. So it wouldn't be economically viable to just go around the coffee shops collecting the coffee grounds and taking them over to the recycling centre. However, by implementing this particular technique in supply chain coordination, we're able to ensure that that recyclable resource can very efficiently reach a destination where it's valued. And this same concept can be applied to sort of other recyclable resources, such as donated surplus food or return or reusable packaging schemes, both of which are indeed activities that we engage in. Now, the point at which the green coffee shop scheme starts to hopefully give a glimpse of the wider local food ecosystem concept is that within a very short space of time, we had tremendous success with the green coffee shop scheme. And in fact, we were collecting around a ton of coffee grounds every week. And at this point, it was possible for us to start dividing the haul. So half would go to the recycling centre, and the other half would go to a local organic farm who would use it for compost. And of course, our van would come back from that delivery filled with organic vegetables. So now that scheme has expanded beyond oat milk, coffee grounds and coffee logs to include compostable material and organic vegetables, this is where you can hopefully begin to glimpse the enormous potential of the local food ecosystem concept, because that nexus of local food enterprises grows, and you start to imagine all of the little interrelationships that can happen, and all of the different sort of products and other resources, including recyclable goods, can be very efficiently exchanged within them. And of course, by structuring your supply chain like this, you're able to do an awful lot of you're able to do things a lot more efficiently and, more importantly, cost effectively. So some of the costs that you're cutting out by doing things this way are transportation costs, because you're no longer transporting goods over vast distances. You are eliminating wastage costs, and you're eliminating sort of the costs or sort of profit margins that are added by intermediaries along a lengthy supply chain. So that in a nutshell is the local food ecosystem concept.
That's beautiful. It's such a, like you say, it's so expansive. It's like so many potential connections and avenues, and I imagine that so much of this is about people having conversations and realizing that that's something that I could add as a offering to my business, or perhaps tie in another way. And I think that there's so much of this that underlies the power of simplicity, because none of it's really rocket science, but it's incredible that sort of volume of coffee waste that you're talking about. That is huge, and to be able to then utilize that locally for fuel, you kind of can start to see the impact. It's not just reducing that waste, it's actually reducing the need for other sources of fuel. So that you can go off in all directions on this. Like you said, it's a bit of a it's a bit of a big picture, so it's very useful to have that as an example to sort of hone us in on. The idea of being organic and sustainable with food, do you think they're interlinked to the local food system? Do you think that the way that food is produced is something that becomes more recognised and more identified by the consumer in this sort of shorter supply chain?
Yeah, so I mean, this really is the big one, really, isn't it? It's the future sustainability of our food system, and the way that most food is produced at the moment is inherently unsustainable. We talked before about sort of a linear economy, and yeah, the linear economy basically is, begins with the exploitation of a resource, be it sort of soil, human labour, sort of forestry, mining, sort of minerals and what have you. So it begins with the exploitation of a resource, the adding of value to it, and then at the end of that chain, there's some sort of waste goods that have to go somewhere. And this is all well and good, provided you've got unlimited resource to exploit at the beginning and an unlimited sort of world capacity to deal with the waste. But of course, you have neither of these things. So we have to sort of rethink the way our economy is structured in order to recognise that we live in a finite planet. It's a beautiful planet, and we've got to look after it because it's our home. So you talked about sort of organic, and organic food production is much more sustainable. It's much more based about sort of looking after that soil, because a well managed, the soil itself is its own ecosystem. It's beautiful stuff. It will continue to produce food forever if it's managed well. But if you're continually basically destroying the biodiversity that exists within the soil by continually adding pesticides and herbicides, and sort of farming it intensively, so that soil sort of erodes away, then there are only sort of so many harvests left. There's only there's only so much of that our soils can bear. So there's an ever increasing sort of world population, and making sure that we're able to produce to feed that population sustainably, sort of several generations into the future, or you'd say indefinitely into the future, it really is of paramount importance to our species, basically.
Yeah, it's just such a huge topic, and there's so many wonderful things going on around the world in different systems that are rebuilding soil, increasing the diversity of the soil, and ensuring that that can be regenerated, and then providing highly nutritious, sustainable food for the future. But there is this essential link in between of those projects, those farms producing this wonderful food, and the consumer making those decisions that that's what they're going to purchase to put on their table. And I think this is it's a really interesting area of discussion that I can kind of anticipate the work that you're doing with the ecosystems. It adds a potential solution, or a part of that solution, that's connecting the consumer to where the food comes from in a way that you don't have to sort of go and lecture them and say this is better for you, but you're actually just giving them that convenience and building that into the routine of this is what's available, and it happens to also be really fantastic for you, really fantastic for the planet. Do you consider that the way that the ecosystem works, it seems to have a wonderful potential for businesses to diversify, or like you've talked about the utilization of the vehicles for, no wasted journeys, no empty vans, and that sort of scrapes back a little bit of the expenditure. Do you feel like all of this tied in together can be a good deal for the consumer if they're looking to support a smaller farm? It may be that there's a higher cost, but that it can be brought down a little bit, like that economic factor can make this equally affordable for the consumer.
Yeah, so to come back to something that I said before, running a small, and I've been up and down the country, running a small food enterprise is hard. It's incredibly hard. Not only is it hard work, it's really hard, to make it financially viable. And, the fact that we have any small food enterprises at all these days is really just testimony to those individuals who just want to do things the right way and who sort of roll their sleeves up and they're sort of prepared to sort of work in a highly principled way and sort of forego the kind of financial comfort that sort of most a lot of people sort of take for granted. So what the food hub and the local food ecosystem is about? I'm very much one for what I'd call appropriate pricing of food. So we have to be aware, and we're becoming more and more aware of this because food prices have like this. We've become accustomed to sort of artificially low cost of food, So what we're not all about is trying to make sort of local, really good, high value, good quality local food cheap. Because as soon as you start doing that, it becomes a race to the bottom. You're talking about the commodification of our food, and that's not what we're all about. What we are trying to do, but by sort of doing things more efficiently, and as I say, addressing those costs like transportation costs, profit margins along sort of length of supply chains, high wastage. Those are good costs to be cutting out of our food system, and hopefully by doing that and enabling sort of more efficient trade between local food enterprises, you are at least able to bring sort of good quality, sustainably and locally produced food within a more acceptable tolerance of intensively produced food.
Yeah, I think that it's a complex question because, like you've pointed out, we are used to food being too cheap. And it's difficult to say that when people are struggling and with so many increasing costs. We have to ensure that everybody can have those basic needs met. But when we look at the percentage of what people spend on food versus other things in their life, and then we look at how that money is being utilised to support all the middlemen, but not actually making it profitable for the farmer, that leaves a huge number of questions and problems that need rebalancing. And so, yeah, there's certainly no, we shouldn't be seeking cheap food by any means, but there's something, I think, about the resilience that a more localized system can offer, that perhaps if we fast forwarded and looked to the future, we'd have like the conventional, highly industrialized food kind of like this on the shelf. The price would be shooting up some months like we see. We might call it cheap, but it's going to be very unpredictable. Whereas what is more sustainably produced can offer a little bit more of a consistent price. It might be higher, but I think there's a potential there for less unknowns in the production and the longevity of that viewpoint.
If I can sort of add another point on that, when we talk about sort of this cheap food, it really is artificially cheap. I think what a lot of people don't recognize or understand is that there are a huge number of externalized costs that are associated with that cheap food. That gets, well, so some of it is covered, through our sort of taxation and, the money that we have to pay to water companies to, clean nitrates out of the water system, et cetera, et cetera. But so some of it is also just costs that aren't being met by anybody at the moment. So, when we talked about sort of exploitation of soils and the sort of destruction of the biodiversity, if you could put a commercial value on, all the sort of microflora and fauna that's within the soil and can allow you to produce, food indefinitely in a well-managed soil, that there is no sort of pound, shilling and pence value that you put on that, but it is incredibly valuable. And, by exploiting and destroying that soil, microflora and fauna in order to produce cheap food, there's a massive externalized cost there that nobody's actually picking up. So this is why sort of much of the local food ecosystem is as much about trying to sort of showcase alternative economic models. It's not just about how do we get food around a bit more efficiently. It's actually saying how do we look at the wider economy and look for pointers as to how we're going to structure things better in the future. Yeah. And I another sort of final thing that I kind of want to say is, our box scheme and the food hub, we address a vanishingly small proportion of the population. I've long sort of given up any sort of notion of, trying to, be the, this is the way, this is going to be how all food things is from now on. But I think the importance of what we're trying to do is just to at least sort of, it's to try, really. It's to try something new and sort of maybe showcase something that does work a little bit more efficiently, which is a bit more sort of environmentally friendly, etc. So that's really what we're out to achieve, is just to innovate and just try it out, basically.
Yeah, you're giving people an option, and I think that there's something very inspiring about that. That it doesn't have to be for everybody, but it's having a choice that people can take that instead of the other. How long have you been doing the distribution in this way, the local ecosystems? How long have you been doing that, and have you noticed that there's any shift in innovation in the type of produce that's produced locally, or the type of farm size that you've got, or is it more to do with the other opportunities like the coffee waste and the deliveries that you've seen the innovation?
So the food hub's been operational since 2019. So, and in fact, I think it was July 2019 when we first started. So we've come up to our fourth anniversary of Food Hub operations. Innovations in the types of foods that are being produced. I'm not sure if we've necessarily seen any innovations that I could directly attribute to the Food Hub being there. I think what the Food Hub has brought is maybe a small step towards better viability for smaller scale businesses, and that's really what I'm all about. Every time I sort of visit a new market gardener or a food startup. I see a little bit of myself from 20 years ago, and also, as I say, through my experiences of running the orchard, just have like an enormous amount of respect for anybody that sort of goes down that route. So yeah, it really is my passion. I sort of see someone that's starting out on their sort of like food producing journey, and I just so desperately want them to be able to make a go of it. And if there's anything that the Food Hub can do to sort of make things a little bit easier for them, then that's what I'm all about. But yeah, there's really nothing that excites me more than meeting a new food producer. I've just literally last week came across a new couple who'd started up a mushroom producing business. They're growing, well, they introduced me to some varieties of mushroom that I hadn't even come across before, but they're beautiful. They've done so much research. They've really sort of got their techniques down to a T, and the quality of the mushrooms that they're producing is exceptional. And yeah, they're sort of most certainly going to start marketing their mushrooms through the Cambridge Food Hub. And I'm just so excited about it. It's always hard to sort of pick out sort of one food producer, and the shame sort of a real shame is as much as I get excited about new startups, I keep coming back to this thing. It's incredibly hard to run a small scale food enterprise, and as quickly as new ones are starting up, some existing ones are going out of business. All the time. So that kind of breaks my heart as well. I really want to get to the stage where the Food Hub has sort of reached that critical mass where you can actually make a difference and sort of make proper steps towards sort of both creating and then nurturing this vibrant local food economy.
Yeah, it is. I suppose it's a place for very passionate people where they've dedicated themselves to create these enterprises. And a big part of starting any business is the marketing side of it. So even if you're just offering them this higher profile and this route to market to local consumers, then that's a big step up from having to sort of do all of that from scratch themselves. Because that's one of the challenges is if you are busy producing and you're wearing all these different hats already and you're working all hours, there's just no hours left to think about, well, how do I tell people that I've got this available for sale, and how do I reach them and take it to the market at the weekend? So you're doing this kind of this service, I suppose, that works really, really nicely for those smaller scale farms. Do you also have larger producers involved?
We do have larger producers. I think it is necessary to have the larger producers in the mix in order to be able to, if we only dealt with local small scale artisanal producers, there wouldn't be the volume of food to do it, and there'd be a fairly sort of scattered sort of range of things. And when you're, let's say, approaching a sort of a local retail outlet, and you're sort of saying, you need to, or would you like to sort of have access to some lovely local things? That you need to be able to present them with a range. As you were taught, I wanted to sort of reflect on sort of a point that you were making, because you're absolutely right. A big part of the premise of the Food Hub is just to say that if you're passionate about making jam, then that's what we want you to spend your time doing. We want you to be making jam sort of 7 a.m. till 10 at night, and sort of just doing what you love doing and doing what you do best. And if you're sort of not so interested in invoicing and delivering things or marketing or all the other sort of bits that are necessary when you're running a small business, those are really the tasks that the Food Hub is there to provide for the smaller scale producer. So one of the reasons why small food enterprises are so few and far between. So let's talk about the mushroom startup that I previously mentioned. Now, in order to make that sort of a viable business, if say there's a farm shop that wants to stock their mushrooms, then they have to take responsibility of getting those mushrooms to the farm shop. And so the types of farm shops that likely to stock them, let's say they might take 20 punnets of mixed mushrooms, and let's say it's about 5 miles between the mushroom farm and the farm shop. So those mushroom producers are going to have to maybe take an hour, take about an hour, and they've got 10 miles worth of delivery. So a small, even a small average family car has got running costs of, these days probably about 50p a mile. So, you've got £5 in transportation, and if they, a real living wage rate of pay for the hour that it takes, then you're looking at around £17-18 worth of costs to deliver 20 punnets of mushrooms. So you can soon begin to see why that just simply isn't economically viable to run a business like that. So with the Food Hub, you say, what might it mean to those mushroom producers if they were able to get their mushrooms to the farm shop, receive exactly the same amount of money, but incur none of the costs of getting them there? That might just be the difference between viability of the business and otherwise. And that's exactly what the Food Hub is able to do. I'll be here an awful lot longer if I go into the more intricate details of our revenue model and how we actually accomplish that. But just take my word for it. We're able to do that for the mushroom producers or the jam producers. And yeah, we get them from where they need to be to the retailer or the end user, and it doesn't cost a penny for the small food producer.
Yeah, which is, it just sounds incredible, really, in terms of what you're offering to the smaller producers and also to the farm shops, because they must have a greater array of products that they can offer more readily, which in turn it's good for local business in that way too.
Yes, yeah. The value offering to the to the buyers in this situation is in some ways they benefit from direct trade, which means there's a cost saving right there, because they're able to buy from less than they would through a sort of a wholesaler that would add a profit margin. But also it's having access to, in my opinion, the most desirable food products. What could be more desirable than that lovely punnet of mushrooms or some locally produced jam? If you're a farm shop, that's exactly what you want to have on your shelf. And the third part of the value offering is to be able to demonstrate to your customers that you're buying through a very sustainable supply chain.
Yeah, it makes huge sense. So with the hub, you are predominantly serving business to business, and you're giving those small producers access to those farm shops, the local restaurants. Do you take that up to sort of public procurement and supplying schools, or is there particular decisions that you've made on what the customers look like?
No, that's definitely the end goal, but it's from the outset, it's been one of the objectives, but it's also an incredibly that's a hard nut to crack, and it's not through lack of trying. I mean, we are working with a couple of the colleges in Cambridge in a very sort of like small sort of foot in the door kind of way, but hopefully that's something that we'll be able to build. But it has long been identified that public procurement is the is going to have, well, once you've cracked that particular one, it will have enormous impact in terms of our food system. Yes. So definitely, that is very much an aspiration. Definitely.
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier on that this is almost something that doesn't exist quite yet in terms of the concept and the vision of what the potential of it could become. But you have been doing it for a number of years now very successfully in Cambridge, and you can quite clearly see the opportunities and the expansion that comes from that. But I'm wondering just how specific the opportunities are to a given location. So we are in Lincolnshire discussing the potential with various businesses, and you've actually, I believe, visited and done a review yourself of the potential of things here in Lincoln. I wonder if you could sort of highlight to people, if they're in other locations, what would be a good starting point? What's a good grounding and foundation for building hubs and that sort of encouraging the relationships that are necessary?
Well, really, the foundation for it all is, of course, production. Production is everything. You've got to. So the first thing that I'd say is, nurture your local producers. Reach out to the ones that are already there and sort of show them that sort of a local route to market is going to work for them. I hasten to add that I think Lincoln has got amazing potential for setting up a really top-notch local food ecosystem, because it is such a productive part of the country. I'm envious of you living where you do, and when I did come up to Lincoln, I left on something of a high, because not only have you got not only are you surrounded by fantastically productive land, but the practitioners that you have in the area, the people that I met were themselves really passionate about what they did, and seemed really really up for it. They when the question was asked, do you want to set up a local food ecosystem in Lincolnshire? It's like everybody's hand went into the air. So there's an amazing attitude among the members of the Lincolnshire local food ecosystem. You've got amazing potential, and I think you've also got people that have got the drive to see it happen. So I just really hope that. But of course, you're talking about really sort of like forward thinking, reforming the food supply chain. It takes more than goodwill and sort of enthusiasm. So I really hope that the people who are trying to make things in Lincoln do get the support that they need from local authorities. In fairness, the City of Lincoln Council also seemed very supportive of it. It's where do the resources to make these things happen come from? So it's probably sort of higher up the higher sort of governmental level that resource needs to come from. But there's such incredible potential in and around Lincoln that I really hope something comes of the good work that has already started there. Definitely.
Yeah, it is absolutely filled with a lot of passion for growing, and different small businesses that could definitely come together and build something. So yeah, we're hopeful, and I think that a big aspect of it comes down to logistics. It's very much a sort of joining the dots and making things work on that level. So we've probably got our own unique challenges with that to address. But yeah, getting that support, and there's something about the uniqueness of coming together as opposed to sort of working on your business with your own team. Actually, sort of that collaboration across businesses. That I'm wondering where you started the thinking with that. Was there a few businesses that knew one another, and you thought you could see those relationships already forming?
Yeah, so I guess the fact that, as the Cambridge Organic Food Company, the box scheme side of the business, because that is very well established, it'd been already going for 20 years by the time the food hub started trading. A lot of those trading relationships were already well established. There was already an established sort of revenue stream. So yeah, so we weren't sort of entirely starting from scratch, as it were. It's starting anything from complete scratch is always that little bit more challenging.
Yes, yeah. No, I think there's so much potential, and I love that you've taken the time to write your book, because that offers people a lot of insights that they can reflect on and see the value of this from many different points of view. Are there any other resources that you'd like to share with people if they're interested in learning more?
Yeah, so there is sort of a lot of good quality research being done into sort of food hubs and the role that they might play in the future. So people could look to institutions like the Centre for Food Policy at City University in London, or the Centre for Agroecology, Water and Resilience, or CAWR, which is part of Coventry University. Those are two sort of academic institutions that people could sort of turn to. I'd say Sustain, the organisation Sustain is a good resource to sort of call upon, see what research they're doing.
Yeah, fantastic. It's interesting how many how many organisations are sort of looking into the potential of these kind of models. There's clearly a need. There's clearly something in it that's got a huge potential. So, I really appreciate you sharing everything today. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure sort of meeting you and having this. I don't think I've ever done a podcast quite like this before, so it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much for asking me.
And thank you for listening to this episode of We Are Carbon. New episodes are added every other Tuesday, so don't forget to subscribe to keep up to date. It's a huge help to the show if you'd like to add a thumbs up or a review on whichever platform you're listening on. And let's keep figuring this all out together.